Hashtag the inheritance betrayal. After suffering a terrible accident, my husband chose to leave for London with the $7 million from my inheritance and left me stranded in the hospital. "Don't bother me, I don't have time for a cripple like you," he shouted mockingly at me, so I decided to get my revenge, and seconds later at the airport. Before I tell you everything that happened, leave me a comment telling me what city you're listening to my story from. I'd love to know how far my voice has reached. The love of her life entered the room and left her to die with a smile. Sarah woke up wrapped in pain. It wasn't physical pain at first, it was something more subtle, an emptiness in her chest, a kind of absence that couldn't be explained by wounds or fractures. Around her, white lights, tubes, the constant beeping of a machine, and a clinical silence that squeezed her soul. Everything smelled of disinfectant, of solitude, of the end of something she didn't know had finished. She tried to move her arm. A needle pierced her skin. She had to blink several times to focus on the ceiling. She remembered a scream. Brakes, glass, and then darkness. Sarah was 34 years old. She was strong, brilliant, a woman who had given everything for those she loved. She always thought love was synonymous with sacrifice, that enduring was part of caring. Now she was in a bed not knowing if her legs would move again, not knowing why no one had come to see her. "Where?" she murmured with a broken voice. A nurse approached, smiling at her with compassion. "Hello, sweetheart. The worst is over. You're alive. That's what matters." "Michael?" Sarah nodded with her eyes. The nurse hesitated. "Your husband. I think he left a few hours ago. He said he'd return later." A stab pierced her stomach. Later sounded like an excuse, a lukewarm lie, but she forced herself to believe. He was scared or confused, or maybe it just hurt him to see her like this. 3 hours passed. Then 5. The sunset painted the room with golden light, almost painful. The nurse returned with a food tray. Sarah didn't eat, just waited. When the clock struck 9:13 p.m., the door opened. Michael entered as if he didn't know her. He wore a navy blue suit, an impeccable shirt, and the same gold watch Sarah had given him on their 5th anniversary. He didn't bring flowers, nor a note, nor a grimace of concern. She wanted to cry, wanted to extend her hand. He stopped 3 feet from the bed. "I thought you wouldn't come," Sarah whispered with a still weak voice. "And I wasn't planning to," he replied without emotion. She blinked, tried to smile. Maybe it was a joke. "Michael, I'm alive. I was afraid I'd never see you again. And I was afraid you'd survive." The silence that followed was a bomb that exploded in slow motion. Sarah swallowed. The room became colder. "What are you saying?" He came closer just a little without touching her. He looked at her with a mixture of contempt and boredom. "I'm saying I don't have time for a cripple like you." Sarah felt the world split in two. "How can you say that to me? With the same ease with which you were willing to give me your life, Sarah. You believed marriage was a crusade of sacrifices, and that I was your cause. But you were useful while you inherited. Now you're not. I don't understand." Her voice trembled as if her soul were unraveling from within. "Michael, you were my life. That's why it was so easy to take everything from you." Then, without blinking, Michael dropped a thick envelope on the table. Inside were documents. Sarah recognized her signature, but didn't remember signing them. "I'm taking the $7 million from your father's inheritance. It's already in my account, and tomorrow I'm flying to London." "You can't do that." "I already did. And everything we lived, the years, the sacrifices? You made them. Not me." He leaned slightly toward her. "Do you know what it's like to live with someone who demands you be happy while they sink? I got tired of pretending." "You pretended all this time?" "Not everything. There were moments when I loved you in my own way. But you were heavy, Sarah. You took care of everything. You never needed me to shine, so I took your light." She broke into tears. A tear ran down her cheek and mixed with the dried blood on her ear. Michael looked at her like someone observing a crack in a stranger's wall. "You have a lifetime to rebuild yourself. Do it. But without me. Why are you doing this to me now when I need you most? Because if I don't do it now, I'll never leave you, and I'm sick of you." Sarah wanted to scream, get up, hit him, but she couldn't move, could barely breathe. "Tell me this is a nightmare. Tell me it's not real." "It's more real than everything you built in your head, Sarah." The door opened. Michael was already leaving when she managed to gather strength for one last whisper. "I loved you with everything." He stopped, turned his head slightly. "That's why you lost everything. Learn if you can." And he left. ## Chapter 2, The Awakening. The door closed. The monitor's beeping accelerated. Sarah hyperventilated. She cried with her eyes open, staring at the envelope on the table as if that paper had a life of its own. The nurse entered, screamed upon seeing the monitor's state. Sarah could barely pronounce a word. "Help, please." The nurse pressed buttons, called for assistance. In seconds, a doctor rushed in. While they injected her with a sedative, Sarah could only repeat between babbles. "He took everything. He took my life. My life." The doctor looked at her with understanding eyes. "Stay calm, darling, you're going to be fine." But no, nothing was fine. In that moment, Sarah understood it wasn't just about her broken body. There was something deeper, more irretrievable. The certainty that she had been loved, because now she knew she hadn't been. Hours later, in the early morning, she woke with a strange calm, as if her heart, tired of crying, decided to anesthetize itself. She looked at the white ceiling. She couldn't feel her legs, but in her chest burned something new. It wasn't sadness, it was rage. A soft, warm rage that filtered through every corner of her body like slow poison. For the first time in years, Sarah stopped asking herself what she had done wrong and began asking herself how she would make him pay. Because that was the part Michael didn't know. He had awakened a woman who no longer had anything to lose, and that made her dangerous. ## Chapter 3, Remembering the Signs. Sarah opened her eyes at dawn. The hospital remained in twilight. Outside, the sky began to tint with the promise of a new day, but for her, the light had another tone. That of a truth that had been hidden for too long, that of a life she now had to revisit with different eyes. The air smelled of alcohol, of disinfectant, but also of betrayal. Everything tasted like lies. She was alone and she knew it, not since yesterday but for years. She just hadn't allowed herself to see it. The soft sound of the nurse's footsteps interrupted her silence. Sarah said nothing. She closed her eyes as if still sleeping. She didn't want to talk. She didn't want comfort, she wanted to remember. The pain didn't start with the accident. It started when she said, "I do." She remembered the first time Michael made her doubt. Only 6 months had passed since their wedding. Sarah had just been accepted into a research program in Florence, an artistic scholarship for heritage restorers, something she had dreamed of since she was 19. She told him with enthusiasm, expecting him to share her joy. "Italy," he said, pouring himself a glass of wine. "And how long does that last?" "A year. But it's a unique opportunity, Michael. I was accepted among more than 200 candidates. And what do I do while you go off to live your adventure alone? Do you forget we have a life project together?" "It's not about forgetting you," Sarah said, suddenly feeling guilty about something she didn't understand. "It's a scholarship. I don't have to pay anything. I can study there and then come back. It's temporary. If you leave, the business won't start. We can't build anything if you leave me alone right now. But it's my career, my calling. You always knew that." Michael looked at her drowsily and shrugged. "Do what you want, Sarah, but don't ask me to wait for you." She gave up the scholarship that night. No one asked her to. She just saw his face, his dull voice, his hurt look, and couldn't. In the hospital, Sarah clenched her fists. Why had she never seen it for what it was? Control. Emotional blackmail wrapped in love's disguise. He knew she couldn't tolerate making anyone suffer. She had learned it as a child from her mother, who always called her the soft soul of the house. The soft soul ended up paying for everyone's broken dishes. She remembered when Michael lost a millionaire investment by trusting a corrupt partner. Sarah sold her father's vineyard to save him. That place was her inheritance, her childhood. The afternoons among barrels, the smell of fermenting grapes, her grandfather's hands holding hers while he taught her to smell the tannins. "It's not just land and wood," Michael told her when signing the papers. "What matters is you and what we're going to build." She believed him, just as she believed when he convinced her to put her name as president on the new company's papers. "It's for tax reasons," he told her. "You trust me, right?" That phrase haunted her for years. "You trust me," said in her ear after a fight, murmured in the car after an argument, whispered in bed while he hugged her, as if trust were a coin only he knew how to use. ## Chapter 4, The Deeper Betrayal. Sarah closed her eyes and breathed deeply. The nurse adjusted her blankets without saying anything. She thanked her silently. She didn't have strength to talk, but her mind wouldn't be quiet. Emma, her sister, her only living family. Sarah told her everything always. Every tear, every time Michael came home late, every suspicion, every time she felt something was wrong. And Emma always hugged her with the same words. "Michael loves you, he's just stressed. You're stronger than this. You're the pillar, Sarah." Sarah, only she called her that, with that sweet tone their mother used when consoling her as a child. Now she understood. They always made her feel like the strong one because that way they could keep loading her up. The day she signed the papers for the second loan was also the day Emma asked her to lend her money. A high sum. She said it was to open an art gallery, that she needed that push. Sarah agreed. How could she not? It was her sister. She owed her everything since their parents died. I'm going to pay you back. I swear. You're like Mom. You're always there, always saving. You don't have to swear anything, Emma. You're my family. You're like Mom. The phrase hung in her head. Not as praise but as an anchor. Always saving, always forgetting herself. In that moment, in room 315, Sarah understood something that hurt more than the accident. Her tragedy wasn't Michael. It was never having learned to say no, never having demanded, never having asked for something for herself. She had been raised to endure, to yield, to understand, until understanding cost her body. The door opened. This time it wasn't the nurse. It was Lucy, her friend from university. She carried flowers and a worried expression. Sarah wasn't expecting her. She hadn't even thought to tell her. How are you? Lucy asked, approaching. I found out from the hospital. It made me angry that you didn't call me. Sarah looked at her with tired eyes. I didn't know you were still here. I never left. Only you disappeared. Lucy sat beside her and took her hand. You're alone now. Sarah swallowed. Yes. Lucy frowned. Michael. He's not here. The laugh that came from Sarah was more a lament than mockery. He went to London with my money, with everything. Lucy was speechless for a few seconds, then straightened up. What? He took $7 million. My inheritance. He left me in this bed and told me he didn't have time for a cripple like me. Lucy opened her mouth but found no words. Why didn't you tell me things were so bad? She managed to say finally. Because I didn't know either. Not completely. Or I didn't want to see it. I thought the fights, the silences, the absences were part of wear and tear. Lucy shook her head furiously. You always gave more than you had. Always. And now I have nothing. Lucy squeezed her hand. You have someone who believes you. That's already something. Sarah looked down. It was hard to admit she needed help. All her life she had been the savior, the one who gave. Now asking felt like betrayal to who she was. Emma knew, she murmured. Lucy went still. What? She pushed me to continue. Always defended Michael. Always told me it was my fault for being so demanding, so hard, that I was drowning him. Lucy closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her gaze was different, sharper. Do you find it strange that months ago she called me to ask about foreign investments? Emma. Yes. She asked me about Swiss accounts, about how to open a shell company. I thought she was helping Michael. Now I understand everything. Sarah felt the air leave her. The pieces were starting to fit. It was no longer just betrayal. It was conspiracy. How long? Forever. I need to get out of here, she said, trembling. You still can't walk. Then help me walk again. I can't stay still while they live with what they took from me. Lucy nodded. She stood up. I'm going to help you, but promise me something. What? That you won't forgive them again. Sarah looked toward the window. The sun had already risen. For the first time, she didn't feel it as warm. She felt it as fire, as a warning. This time, no. This time I won't be silent. ## Chapter 5, The Discovery. Lucy left her alone. Sarah closed her eyes again. Behind her eyelids, images of wasted years passed again. Her laughter at family dinners, Christmas gifts bought with love. The first time she took him to meet her parents. Everything tinted gray. She was no longer going to cry for what she didn't see or for what she allowed. Revenge wasn't her engine. Balance was what she sought. The truth. And truth, like fire, only serves if it burns what should no longer live. And in that moment she knew with certainty that the worst hadn't been the accident. The worst was yet to be discovered. Sarah stopped crying 3 days ago. Crying didn't help her. Tears never prevented them from tearing pieces from her soul. They only washed her face so she'd appear intact. Now she knew. She no longer wanted to seem whole. She wanted to understand why she had become a stolen trophy, a victim agreed upon between two people who knew every inch of her body, her trust, her history. She was discharged with a controlled smile. The doctor explained she should enter a rehabilitation center. She pretended to agree, but her decision was already made. She wouldn't stay under supervision. She needed freedom, even if every step hurt. If she had to drag herself, she would. If she had to crawl, she would. But she would do it alone. Lucy helped her leave the hospital. She rented her a small apartment in a discreet area of the city, far from noise, from familiar looks, from anything that felt familiar. The building was old, with damp walls and a broken elevator, but it had privacy. That was all she needed. "Are you sure you want to be alone?" Lucy asked while placing a box on the dining table. "Alone is how they left me," Sarah replied without looking up. Lucy sighed. She didn't insist. She knew there was a rage that couldn't be cured with company, that needed space to boil, to transform into something useful. The first days in the new apartment were slow. Sarah could barely move her legs, but she had recovered part of the sensation. The wheelchair was now an extension of her body, not a cage. She spent hours in front of the laptop, among legal documents, balances, old emails. She needed to understand, not just recover what they stole, but reconstruct the map of betrayal. When did it all start? Where did the line break between love and abuse? One night, while trying to access a shared cloud folder, something unlocked. It was a poorly labeled video call file, with a date she didn't recognize. She almost deleted it by accident, thinking it was a backup of meetings with suppliers, but curiosity stopped her. Double-click. Full screen. And then everything changed. The image took a few seconds to stabilize. Michael appeared. He was smiling. That smile she had loved so much. He was shirtless in what looked like a hotel room. In the background, the sound of laughter she knew better than her own name. Emma, her sister. Her blood appeared on screen. She wore only a red silk robe. She sat on Michael's legs and kissed him slowly, complicitly, not like an affair, like a couple of years. Sarah felt a dry blow to her stomach. It was hard to breathe. She gritted her teeth. The image didn't stop. Michael laughed with his face hidden in Emma's neck. "I can't believe it worked," he said. "The idiot even sold her father's vineyard. She didn't even realize." Emma adjusted her hair, satisfied. "She's not an idiot. She was just trained to obey. She always wanted Mom to approve of her, even though Mom is dead. She spends her life saving others, so someone will tell her she's worth it. And you knew her better than anyone. Of course. Who do you think put the idea in her head that you needed her more than Florence?" Michael burst out laughing. Emma took her glass and toasted. "To Sarah, the martyr, the eternal banquet. The only thing we did wrong," Michael added while lighting a cigarette, "was leaving her alive." Emma didn't respond, just kissed him again. The video ended. Sarah remained motionless. Still, her body trembled. Part of her hoped it was a montage, an experiment, a joke, but it was real. Every gesture, every word. Emma had studied her, molded her, programmed her like a bomb that should never explode. She gave her comfort to silence her. She offered tenderness to lull her to sleep, and now she had sold her. Like meat in an auction. She screamed. Not from pain. She screamed like an animal that understands it has been hunted, that it has been watched, that its life doesn't belong to it. She took the laptop with both hands and threw it against the wall. The blow was dry. The plastic exploded into pieces. Then she remained silent, panting, as if her soul had also broken into 1,000 parts. ## Chapter 6. The Plan. She spent the next 3 days without speaking, without eating, without answering Lucy's messages. She didn't cry. Her body wouldn't allow it. There was something deeper than sadness. A fury she didn't even know how to name. She wanted to scratch her skin, tear out her memory, but she couldn't. Then she thought about killing them. For the first time in her life, she wished for that. Not killing in the literal sense, not with knives, not with blood. Killing them as they killed her, slowly, without leaving traces, with words, with abandonment, with guilt. On the 4th day, Lucy entered by force. She found her on the floor without strength, with cracked lips from dryness. "Sarah, what the hell are you doing?" Sarah barely turned her neck. "I saw it," she said with a hoarse voice. "The video." Lucy approached, gave her water, settled her in bed, cleaned her face. She knew it was something more. "Your sister always seemed excessive to me." She wasn't excessive, she was precise. "She knew me better than I knew myself." "That doesn't make you responsible." "They used you. They took advantage." Sarah looked at her with terrifying calm. "And now I'm going to make them understand that has consequences." Lucy swallowed. "What do you plan?" "First, recover my companies. Then, disappear their world." Lucy didn't ask more. She knew the Sarah in front of her was no longer the fragile woman from the previous week. This was another, colder, clearer, lonelier, but with a purpose. The following weeks were a slow process of reconstruction. Sarah learned to get up from the wheelchair. Each attempt was painful, but she didn't give up. She had Emma's voice recorded in her head like a whip. She was trained to obey. Every time she fell, she repeated, "No more." She looked for a trusted lawyer, explained the fraud, gave him copies of the papers signed with her forged signature, the suspicious movements, the emails between Michael and Emma that had been synchronized by error in her cloud backup. She had proof. She had context. She only lacked a strategy. If we present this now, they'll prepare, the lawyer said. And with the money they have, they can flee, hide, manipulate evidence. We need something more. Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. Leave that to me. Meanwhile, Emma kept posting photos on social media. Walks through London, wine glasses, dinners with Michael. Sarah observed them like a patient hunter. Each image was a clue, each smile a weapon. She had learned to look beyond appearances. A month later, she achieved something unthinkable. She walked without help, just a few steps, but enough. She cried in silence, not for the physical achievement, but because she knew that from that moment there would be no turning back. She was no longer the broken woman in a bed. She was the woman who survived her own family. The day she returned to her company's office, no one recognized her. She wore a scarf on her head, dark glasses. She didn't announce herself. She went straight to the legal archive with a court order to recover the ownership of her companies. Thanks to a clause she herself had written years earlier, she could prove the transfers were illegal. The curious thing, she told her lawyer, is that everything Michael stole is still mine. It was just sleeping. ## Chapter 7. The truth revealed. At night she wrote letters, not to send them, to empty herself. She wrote to her dead mother, to her father, to the child she thought would be her son and that she lost in a spontaneous abortion she never told anyone about, to Emma, to Michael, to the woman she was. She burned them one by one in a small ceramic bowl. She watched them burn. Paper also bleeds when it's sincere. One early morning she received an email without a sender. Just a video. She opened it cautiously. It was Emma recorded from her room, crying. "I don't know if you'll see this, but if you do, I want you to know I don't regret it." Sarah remained motionless. "You were weak, Sarah. You always were. Mom made you a martyr, and I grew up being the second dish. The shadow of the saint. Always you shining, you receiving applause, you with scholarships, you with Dad's love. I just wanted what belonged to me, and I took it." The video ended without goodbye. Sarah didn't cry. She just said one phrase to the void. "Thank you for confirming it." The next morning she froze all accounts associated with her old company. Michael and Emma were stranded in London without access to cash. Sarah had waited for the right moment. Every movement was timed. The victim's power isn't crying, it's waiting. And Sarah no longer waited for understanding. She waited for justice, not courtroom justice or official seals. Sarah didn't believe in systems that once made her sign papers without reading because she trusted people who were supposed to take care of her. The justice she sought was older, raw. She didn't need to see them in prison. She wanted them to look at each other with distrust, to sleep embraced but wondering if the other would sell them when they woke up, to destroy each other without her touching a single stone. Michael and Emma no longer had access to accounts. They were trapped in a city that wasn't theirs, but that wasn't enough. Sarah knew it. There was something more, something escaping her. She felt it in her body like pressure in her chest that wasn't relieved by rage or silence. A piece was missing, the one that explained why everything had crumbled so precisely. Why the accident, the signature, the betrayal, everything had been executed with such surgical synchrony. She needed to go back, review what she had left forgotten, return to the root. ## Chapter 8. The Final Truth. Lucy helped her enter the legal warehouse where they kept archives from the old family company. It was dusty, full of boxes stacked like ruins of a life that no longer belonged to her. Sarah walked the narrow aisles with a flashlight. The air smelled of humidity and betrayal. "Are you sure all this is necessary?" Lucy asked, shaking a box marked 2017, Internal Transactions. "I don't know. But if there's one thing I don't want, it's to be surprised again. I prefer to find the rot before they serve it to me." They spent hours among papers, contracts, minutes, balances, permits. Sarah glanced quickly, but without losing detail, until an unlabeled folder caught her attention. It was hidden behind a box of accounting records, accumulated dust, barely visible seals. She opened the folder. Inside was a notarized sheet. Sealed, signed. Sarah felt a chill. She read the header. Total and definitive transfer of business assets in the name of Michael David Harrison. Date: 6 months before the accident. She read the signature. It was hers or seemed like it. Lucy whispered, "What's wrong?" She showed her the document. "This says I transferred everything to Michael. Everything, my companies, my percentage in the country house, even the vineyard shares." Lucy read it in silence, then looked up. Did you sign it? Never. I would never have signed something like this. I'm sure, Lucy. This was before the accident. There was no reason. We were bad, yes, but not to the point of giving away my life. Lucy narrowed her eyes. What if they already knew what they were going to do? Sarah felt her heart beating in her temples. What if the accident was part of the plan? She asked in a low voice. What if they caused it to not leave loose ends? She read the document again. The signature's handwriting had a minimal detail, an imperfection, a stroke in the S that she never used. It was almost identical, but it wasn't hers. Her phone rang. It was an old number, a contact she thought was lost. Julian Ortiz, her father's partner. Sarah, she answered immediately. Julian. Sarah. I'm glad to hear from you. I swear I was about to call you myself. Why? I received a change of ownership notification a few months ago. It puzzled me. You told me once you'd never give Michael total control, and then you signed that. Sarah closed her eyes. I signed it. What? There was a brief silence. A document where you transferred everything to his name. It seemed strange to me, but it came with your signature. Michael said you had changed your mind and wanted to retire from the business world. Julian, that signature isn't mine. What do you mean? They forged my signature. They took everything from me, and I'm starting to suspect the accident wasn't coincidence. Julian exhaled forcefully on the other side of the phone. That would explain many things. Weeks before the accident, Michael asked me if I knew any discreet mechanic who could work without asking questions. He didn't tell me why. Sarah felt her stomach twist. The car, the brakes, the crash, everything took on a different meaning. It hadn't been an argument and carelessness. It had been a closure, an attempt to erase the only person who could get in their way. Do you remember the mechanic's name? Yes, I have it in my email. I'll forward it to you. Thank you, Julian. You don't know how much this means to me. You have to be careful, Sarah. If Michael was capable of that, he won't stop. He won't. But neither will I. ## Chapter 9. Confrontation in London. She hung up. Lucy watched her from the doorway. You're thinking the same thing I am. That they tried to kill me, Lucy. They planned everything, made me sign false documents, used me, and when I was no longer useful, they wanted to eliminate me like a defective file. Lucy crossed her arms. Are you going after them? It's no longer about money, not even betrayal. It's about something deeper, a truth I can't allow to remain hidden. That night Sarah didn't sleep. She reviewed the document again and again, recorded the conversation with Julian, prepared a certified copy. The next day she traveled to the mechanic's workshop. He was a robust man with grease-stained hands and a rough voice. Do you remember this car? Sarah asked, showing him a photo of her vehicle. The man looked at her suspiciously. Yes, I worked on it a few months ago. A guy brought it, Michael, I think. He said it was for a special review. He paid me double to not ask questions. Special review? He removed the original brakes, put in a more fragile system. I didn't ask, ma'am. I just did the work. That car crashed. I was inside. I wanted to know if it was coincidence. Now I know it wasn't. The man swallowed. He lowered his voice. I don't want trouble. I'm not going to give you any, but I need you to sign a testimony. If they look for you, they no longer have power. I do, and I'm willing to protect whoever helps me or destroy whoever hides something from me. The man signed. Sarah returned home with a mixture of nausea and clarity. It was no longer just emotional betrayal. It was attempted homicide. Disguised as an accident, an execution that failed. She watched the video of Michael and Emma again. This time she didn't pause it. She studied it like a piece of evidence. She no longer felt pain, she felt strategy. Every word was a clue. Every gesture was a sign of contempt she could use against them. In the video's last scene, Emma mentioned something. When Sarah signed the power of attorney, she wasn't even fully conscious. She didn't realize we gave her a sedative that morning. She just said she trusted us. Sarah stopped the video, rewound, listened again. Sedative. The word pierced her skull. A memory emerged. A morning when Michael prepared her coffee. The taste was bitter. Then everything became blurry. Emma was at home. She told her she had to sign some papers to release an urgent payment. Sarah signed. Then she slept all day. She thought it was stress. It wasn't stress. It was a drug. She sat trembling, no longer from rage, from disgust, from the certainty that she had been asleep during her own legal execution, that they had drugged her, used her, and then tried to erase her. Nothing dies slower than a hidden truth. But when it awakens, it sweeps everything away. And Sarah was no longer going to hide it. She would scream it to the world, even if it cost her life. Because if someone had to pay, it was them. And that account was just beginning. ## Chapter 10, Justice Served. The day she walked again without help, Sarah didn't smile, didn't raise her arms, didn't shout with joy, nor allow herself the luxury of emotion. She just breathed deeply in front of the mirror, looked at her reflection, and thought silently, "I'm no longer the same." She still walked with difficulty. Her legs trembled, her muscles complained with each step, but there was something in her gaze that didn't waver. She had been on the edge of death in every sense and had returned with new certainty. If she couldn't trust anyone, she would trust her own rage. The flight to London was silent. She carried only a bag, false documents, and a passport that no longer bore her old name. She traveled light on luggage and heavy on certainties. Every step she took until boarding the plane was the affirmation that what was coming wasn't revenge, it was justice. The plan had been designed months in advance. The art auction would be held in a private gallery in Mayfair, one of those streets where luxury smells of expensive wine and truths disguised as aesthetics. Michael would appear there as the great collector, presenting a stolen work paid for with money that didn't belong to him. Emma would be by his side as the reinvented muse. Neither knew the work was already legally intervened by an anonymous complaint, and that the event would be broadcast live on social media by the organizer's decision. Sarah had bought her ticket like any other guest. No one recognized her. She wore very short hair, a scarf covering part of her face, and a simple dress. She wasn't looking to draw attention. Just to enter, just to be there when the masks fell. The gallery was lit with dim lights. The white walls contrasted with the displayed works. In the center, an enormous abstract canvas signed by a French artist. Michael spoke with a group of people in English, feigning a European accent, holding a champagne glass. Emma, dressed in black, laughed shamelessly. They seemed comfortable. Accomplices happy. Sarah observed them from afar, as if watching characters from a memory already dead. Nothing they did provoked anger in her. It only confirmed she hadn't exaggerated. They were what they were. Swindlers disguised as culture, lovers wrapped in a long, slow betrayal. Perfect representatives of hypocrisy. She waited for the moment. The event presenter climbed onto the small platform in front of the painting. Everyone applauded. Michael was called to speak. He took the microphone with confidence, as if the world belonged to him. "It's an honor to present this magnificent work," he said. "It's not just an investment, it's a manifesto, a symbol of reconstruction and personal evolution." Sarah walked to the center of the room. No one stopped her. She was dressed like anyone else, like everyone. When Michael paused to toast, she climbed the 2 steps of the platform and took the microphone from him without force. Michael took a few seconds to understand. "Excuse me," Sarah said with a clear voice. "I'll steal just a minute from you. Enough for you to know who's behind all this." The silence was immediate. Some cameras began recording. Others were already doing so in live transmission. Emma, seeing her, opened her eyes wide. Michael turned pale. "The work you're about to auction," Sarah continued, "was paid for with stolen money. Coming from a scam in my name. They used my forged signature, and they didn't do it alone. They did it with the complicity of blood, with my sister Emma Harrison." There was a murmur. Emma tried to approach. "Are you sick?" she said in a low voice. "Get down from there." Sarah didn't look at her. "For years I gave my life to people who only pretended to love me. I stopped being myself to sustain them. They took everything, and when I was no longer useful, they tried to kill me. They disguised it as an accident. But I'm here, not to beg but to show the truth." Michael tried to grab the microphone from her. "This is madness. Don't listen to this woman." Sarah stepped away quickly. She took a folder with certified copies of the evidence from her bag. She held it high. "Here are the documents, the accounts, the transfers, the recording of the mechanic who modified my car's brakes on Michael's orders, the proof of my signature forgery. Everything was delivered to British authorities a week ago. I only came to see your faces when you fall." The gallery's security began advancing toward her. Michael shouted for them to remove her. Emma backed away, but not far enough. At that instant, 4 officers from the Serious Fraud Office entered the room. No one saw them arrive until it was too late. "Michael Harrison," one of them said. "You're under arrest for fraud, tax evasion, and document forgery." The attendees began recording. Michael resisted. Emma screamed. She tried to run toward the door. Sarah intercepted her, didn't touch her, just stood in front of her and forced her to stop with her gaze. You killed me in life, she told her without raising her voice. Today you'll see how guilt gets buried. Emma looked at her as if she didn't recognize her. I didn't want this. Yes, you did. You planned it, you enjoyed it. Don't explain to me now. Save your tears for when no one believes you. Emma was handcuffed alongside Michael. Both were led toward the exit through hallways that once belonged to them. Sarah stepped down from the stage. No one dared stop her. The organizers didn't know if it was part of an artistic intervention, if everything had been prepared, if they had just been accomplices to something much bigger than a simple scam. ## Chapter 11 Freedom. Upon leaving the gallery, Sarah walked slowly down the street among tourists and locals who knew nothing of what had just happened. The air smelled of rain. The sky was heavy as if it were about to fall on London, but inside her the weather was different. There was no peace, but there was order. There was no relief, but there was justice. That night from her hotel room, she watched the headlines. Investment couple arrested at art gallery for $1 million scam. Fraud network discovered at live-streamed auction. Victim appeared in person to expose the truth. Lucy called her. I just saw everything. Sarah, did you do it? No, I just put them in front of a mirror. Are you okay? Sarah thought about the answer for a few seconds. I don't know what being okay is, but I'm awake and that's enough for me. Lucy remained silent. Then she spoke calmly. Today was justice. Tomorrow will be freedom. Sarah turned off the phone, closed her eyes, remembered Emma's voice telling her, You're the pillar. She remembered Michael's whispering, You trust me, right? And she understood that the real victory wasn't that they were in prison. It was that she no longer needed anyone to sustain herself. She was no longer the pillar, no longer the martyr. She was the woman who arose from the ruins, and tomorrow she would keep walking. That was the last thing she thought before closing the hotel door in London and leaving behind the city that had witnessed the fall of the untouchables. She didn't look back, didn't turn her head when the taxi got lost through the wet and silent streets, because something in her had ended. Not the cycle of revenge, but the bond with those who had destroyed her faith. ## Chapter 12 New Beginning. Sarah didn't return to her country. She didn't return to the house where everything began, nor to the vineyard she sold for love. She didn't return to see the building where they stole her name, nor to the courts where they dictated empty sentences. She took a map, drew a line with her finger, and chose a place where she had no history, where no one would look at her with pity, nor with admiration, nor with questions. She wanted a life without witnesses. The cottage she found was old, isolated, built on a hill facing the sea. Walls of wood splashed with salt spray, rusted windows, a wild garden. There was no Wi-Fi, no neighbors, only the sound of waves and wind that hit the windows as if it had something urgent to say. It seemed perfect to her. The first days she dedicated to breathing, not to writing, not to planning, just breathing. She got up early, prepared coffee, went out with a blanket over her shoulders, and sat in a rickety chair to watch the sea. Each morning she took a few more steps. At first with effort, then naturally. After 3 weeks she walked without help. After 6 she could jog on the sand, but she never did. She didn't need to run. She no longer fled from anyone. She didn't rebuild her companies, didn't want to recover her surname, didn't renew her social media, didn't answer calls from journalists, didn't respond to emails asking for interviews. Lucy, from afar, wrote to her from time to time. Sarah answered with brief messages. She knew her friend understood the silence. One rainy afternoon, she found an old typewriter at a flea market. It was missing 2 keys, the ink was dry, and it had a slight metallic creak when hitting the space bar. But as soon as she touched it, she felt a connection that didn't need logic. She bought it, cleaned it, and placed it on a table in front of the window. There she began to write. She didn't do it to publish, not even to keep. She wrote as if someone in another time would read her words like forgotten letters in bottles. She wrote stories about women who woke up late, but in time. Women who were domesticated by fear and freed by pain. Women who walked among ruins and learned not to fear the rubble. She didn't put names. She didn't talk about betrayals or money. She only talked about decisions, about the exact seconds when something breaks inside and there's no turning back. About what it's like to look someone in the eyes and know you'll never trust again. About how a new identity is built when everything you were has been used against you. One cold morning, Sarah was sweeping leaves from the porch when she heard footsteps on the path. She wasn't expecting visitors. No one knew she lived there. In the distance among the trees, she saw a young woman walking with a backpack on her shoulder, a confused face and shoes full of mud. The girl stopped in front of the cottage. Hello, the young woman said with a broken voice. I'm lost. I'm looking for the bus station. My phone died. Could you help me? Sarah nodded. She left the broom leaning against the wall. You're far, but I can take you. It's not much of a walk if we take the right path. The girl smiled with relief. Seriously, thank you so much. Come, take this, Sarah said, offering her a dry scarf. You're soaked. They walked together down a narrow path. Sarah didn't say much. She listened as the girl talked about her mother, about a fight, about an impulsive decision to leave without direction. She spoke with that desperate energy of those who believe the world will break if they don't find answers soon. When they reached the station, the young woman stopped without wanting to leave immediately. I don't know how to thank you, she said. I thought I wouldn't get out of there. Did you get out? Sarah replied. Sometimes getting lost is necessary to know where not to return. The girl looked at her for a few seconds. What's your name, ma'am? Sarah thought about responding, about saying Sarah Harrison, about recovering her surname, her history, but she didn't. She smiled and gently shook her head. That doesn't matter anymore, she said. Just remember this, not everything that breaks dies. Sometimes it's just the beginning of another way of being. The young woman nodded without fully understanding, but knowing she had heard something important. Sarah watched her board the bus. Then she returned down the path, alone as she liked it. Upon reaching the cottage, the wind lifted a paper she had on the table. It was an unsigned letter written on the old machine. She went after it, but didn't catch it. She watched it fly through the air, float among the trees, disappear over the cliff. She smiled. The words were no longer hers, they belonged to the wind. And while closing the door, the sea roared with strength, as if celebrating the birth of something new, something without a name, but with voice. A voice that didn't go silent. A voice that now knew how to walk. #epilogue. An unsigned letter flew over the coast. To those who believe destroying someone is enough to win, learn that there are souls that are reborn from dust and never kneel again. What did you think of this story? There are many people who, like Sarah Harrison, are living silent battles every day. Our hope is that her voice also resonated within you. If this story touched your heart, share it. Make more people feel accompanied. Be part of the change. Tell us in the comments what you would have done in her place. From what city are you watching us? Reading you makes us feel closer to you. And if you haven't already, subscribe, and ring the bell. Each gesture of yours is a sign that these stories must continue being told.